Carry
I'm
on.
very grateful today to welcome our next eminent guest, Sofia Stril Rever, whose skills are beyond expression. She is a spiritual teacher and a writer who promotes inner healing, peace, and universal responsibility. She has authored 3 books with Dalai Lama, including his memoir, My Spiritual Autobiography, in 2009. She is a graduate of Indian Studies from the University of Paris. She traveled to the United States, then to India, where she studied Kala Chakra with Tibetan masters. She received teachings from an Indian Pandit at the Central University of Tibetan Studies in Sarnath and from Tibetan Lama at Kirti Monastery in Dharamshala. In 2016, she co-wrote with Vakya Rinpoche The Meditation Saved Me, story of healing from gangrene of the foot through meditation and mantras. A specialist in mantra therapy, she gives recitals of sacred mantras. In 2017, she published Make the Revolution, the Dalai Lama's appeal to youth, translated into English under the title A Call for Revolution. A Vision for the Future, a manifesto by Dalai Lama on the future of the world, a call to put in place solutions for our chaotic and divided times. She is co-founder of Better We, Better World and initiated Be the Love You Want to See in the World. It echoes Mahatma Gandhi's Be the Change You Want to See in the World. She lectured at the United Nations in Geneva on universal responsibility in November 2017 and February 2020. So please welcome Sofia Stril Rever from France.
Namaskar from Paris, France, where I was happy to welcome you last month, dear Dr. Vikranji, during your tour in Europe. Thank you for kindly inviting me today. Thanks to your team for their wonderful work. And I'm honored and happy to share with you my thoughts about spirituality and happiness. And to begin with, I invite you to imagine a landscape of icy solitude in the mountains of Tibet, east of this immense high plateau, the roof of the world, on the borders of China. It's a winter landscape, 4,000-meter high, and white mountain peaks share an intense, pure blue sky. It's minus 20 degrees Celsius by daytime. And on a snowy slope, as far as the eye can see, meditation huts are built with mud bricks and wood, covered with a faded burgundy red tent canvas. During the day, the canvas is rolled up, and inside the hut, motionless silhouettes can be seen, meditating in the freezing cold. Their thick purple wool coats lined with sheepskin reveal only their faces and hands. They are young nuns who spend their winter retreat here, sitting as we talk in their little huts, battered by the icy Himalayan winds. Notwithstanding the absence of electricity, heat, bathrooms, and even beds, their smiling faces radiate a happiness that we'd like to see more often in great metropolis. City dwellers enjoy comfort and living conditions that seem surreal compared to these humble hermits, isolated in an environment challenging the human capacity for resilience. If I am evoking them, it's because these young nuns who possess nothing possess everything in terms of spirituality and happiness. They are the living example of what we are going to talk about, and in their voluntary destitution, They dedicate the practices for the benefit of all beings. And without us even being aware of it, they pray for the cessation of our suffering and the flourishing of our happiness. This is the reality of spiritual happiness, which is an embodied reality, not a mere subject of discussion. I myself had the incredible good fortune to take my first steps in Tibetan Buddhism with a master who had spent a 17-year retreat in a meditation hut on the heights of Dharamshala in the Indian Himalayas. At the time I met him, he lived in a monastery close to the Dalai Lama, and I went to meditate in his hut. I had to bend in half to enter a tiny timber construction of clay. Only a strength of mind out of the ordinary allows to spend 17 years in such a simple place and be able to follow a strict meditation program. This master used to say that these 70 years in the mountain had been the most meaningful and happiest in his life. He left his hermitage only because His Holiness the Dalai Lama requested him to teach, as he was the only lineage holder of the full Kalachakra meditation system out of Tibet. So, after recalling the living reality of spirituality and happiness, I'd like to review with you what science says. Because there is a science of happiness. What biology says, because biology boasts of discovering the happiness gene. And we'll then turn to the great charismatics such as the Dalai Lama, who authored world best-selling books about happiness. The science of happiness, also known as positive psychology, is a recent branch of psychology founded by Dr. Martin Seligman, an American psychologist and educator. Happiness science draws on genetics. From the color of our eyes and hair to an introverted character, we inherit a lot from our parents. But is it possible that our genes can also influence our happiness? According to science, yes. Happiness indeed has a heritable component. Scientists have identified the happiness gene that directly impacts on the production of serotonin, the neurotransmitter known to trigger feelings of happiness. However, much more is at play than just our DNA when shaping life satisfaction. Happiness is considered nowadays 50% genetic, 25% circumstantial, and 25% behavioral, which means that only 25% of our happiness is in our control. And according to this finding, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, for instance, would be only 25% right when he declared that happiness depends only upon ourselves. However, if discovering the happiness gene truly helps to treat depression, traumas, or bipolarity, knowing the gene of happiness doesn't make us happy persons. Similarly, when neuroscientists observe that the parietal frontal circuit of the brain is active in the relationship with the divine, this doesn't make us spiritual persons. So I think it's time to turn to the spiritual practitioners and listen to what they are telling us about spirituality and happiness. Spirituality seeks happiness in the mind. And the Dalai Lama makes this important clarification. Happiness mind shouldn't be reduced to a mere cognitive ability or intellect. In Tibetan, the word for mind is sem, and sem includes intellect and feeling, heart and mind. If humans have the capability of being happy according to the Dalai Lama, the reason isn't in our genes or brain, but in our fundamental quality of goodness. It may sound counterintuitive to declare that human nature is essentially gentle, because it's generally assumed that aggression is the dominant behavior for the human race. But the Dalai Lama observes that when anger, violence, and aggression arise, it happens only on a secondary or more superficial level. Hatred or aggression arise by default when we are frustrated in our efforts to achieve love and affection. Because overall, our fundamental nature is gentleness. It's interesting to note that modern anthropology supports this vision of the Dalai Lama. In the reinterpretation of Darwin's theory of evolution, survival of the fittest has been replaced by survival of the kindest, in a new anthropology of peace and loving kindness. So the search for happiness is by itself a spiritual journey, for it means to be able to reconnect to the loving kindness, which is our essential nature. And since what we find in loving kindness is happiness, it follows that happiness also is our very nature. We were born to be happy. We were born to receive happiness and to give happiness. And we don't need to reinvent ourselves to be happy, but we need to acknowledge our true nature. Dwelling in our true nature derives from knowing our true nature is a spiritual happiness that doesn't depend from anything external, whether it's physical or material. For instance, the inner happiness of the Himalayan nuns I was mentioning at the start of my talk. Katha Upanishad designates this natural happiness as pure bliss, called Ananda in Sanskrit. Kathopanishad says the source of happiness, or Ananda, is always there in the cave of our heart, where it remains covered by darkness until, through spiritual practices, we pull back the veils that prevent us from glimpsing true unconditional happiness. This is the common teaching of great saints such as Mahananda Moyi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Krishnamurti, or the Dalai Lama. And I love these words of Sri Aurobindo. I quote, "Ananda is the secret delight from which all things are born, by which all is sustained in existence, into which all can rise in the spiritual culmination. Only then, a liberated man, free from ego and his desires, lives at last one with this highest self, one with all beings, and one with God in an absolute bliss of the spirit." Experiencing Ananda, or spiritual happiness, takes us to the experience of oneness and love. And in my understanding, happiness is another word for love. In fact, the first of the four immeasurable, or Chatur Brahmavihara, is love. And in this context, love means helping all sentient beings to experience happiness and the causes of happiness. To connect with our essential happiness, or Ananda, or oneness, or love, I created the Be the Love protocol, inspired by the ancient Indian tradition of Ati Yoga. There are three pillars of the Be the Love meditations. They are view, meditation, and action, as in Hatha Yoga, where view is the awareness of our primordial loving kindness. Meditation means removing our conditioning and contemplating our primordial goodness. And action is implementing the love we are in all life situations. And Hatha Yoga masters of the past promise that by simply turning our mind towards such view, meditation, and action, you'd experience pure inner happiness and would transform all life's difficulties. Transforming oneself to transform the world is no utopia. It's a pragmatic bias. As I was wondering what Mahatma Gandhi meant when he said, be the change you want to see in the world, it dawned upon me that in the radical disruptive change we need today, this is love. And so I adopted Gandhiji's sentence by saying, be the love you want to see in the world. The Be the Love protocol is aligned with the United Consciousness Initiative, for it gives access to a holistic experience of love, oneness, and happiness. And it's my life commitment to contribute to the rise of a whole new, loving, peaceful, and happy humanity on a whole new, loving, peaceful, and happy earth. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you all a very happy United Consciousness Conclave.
Thank you very much, respected Sofia ji. We are blessed in this United Consciousness Conclave to be here with you. This conclave is also supported by G20 and Civil 20 initiatives of whole world to promote one earth, one family, one future. It is also in line with United Consciousness mission, one consciousness, one being, and be the love mission, that be the love which you want to see in the world. So yes, we speak the same language. And so nicely you mentioned about the spiritual happiness, then you also define the scientific dimensions of happiness, that is there any happiness gene. Also you mentioned about Martin Seligman and his approach, initiative in positive psychology, which talks about how even genetically happiness is transferred. But at the same time you mentioned about that the dominant quality of human being, fundamental quality, as His Holiness said, is the goodness. And you also mentioned that yes, from animal to human, it was survival of the fittest, but from human to divine, it will be the survival of the kindest. So I'm sure that the message will be loud and clear for all the audience here. You also mentioned about how Ananda is defined as a secret behind, from which, secret love from which everything is born. So we all are Anandamaya, we all are full of love. And love is, as you defined, is helping others also to experience love, experience happiness. So, and as your protocol, Be the Love protocol, is working for that, I assure on behalf of Project Self Incorporation and United Consciousness to be always there with you at your beck and call to support the Be the Love initiative, because it is for creating a better world around us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vikranji. It's always a pleasure to interact with you in these conferences, and it was such a good time to have you in Paris.
Thank you. I could see your background, and I also telecasted once with the same background. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank Miss Sofia Stril Rever for her beautiful explanation. Thank you so much, Sofia ji.